Hello, my darling Arthur and all my absolutely wonderful peeps. How are you all doing today? I have another monster story for you today. This one is called A Stitch in Time. There was once a young princess called Kate. She lived with her parents and her brothers in a beautiful high-towered palace set on the side of a hill above a wide silver river. In the mornings, Kate learned to play music and dance in the great hall. In the afternoons, she went to her grandmother's private rooms with their huge arched windows that looked down over the green palace gardens to the glittering river, and she learned how to sew. Kate's grandmother sewed the most wonderful embroideries anyone had ever seen. They were fantastic pictures in silk and wool, of flowery gardens, splendid gods and goddesses, handsome knights, and extraordinary monsters. The embroideries hung all over the palace. They had people come from far and wide to see them. They were so lifelike that many people believed they must be magic. Kate longed to sew as beautifully as her grandmother. She spent hours studying the embroideries, and she had noticed a very strange thing. Her grandmother never completely finished the filigrees in her embroideries. In each case, a couple of tiny stitches were always missing. One afternoon, she decided to ask her grandmother why she never completed her figures. "Well, my dear child," said her grandmother mysteriously, "that is the magic part." "What do you mean, grandmother?" asked the princess. "Come here and I'll show you," she replied. So Kate got up from the velvet cushion where she was sitting and looked down at the embroidery her grandmother was working on. It was a picture of Kate herself, but slightly older. There she was in a beautiful blue silk dress with a little crown on her head, standing at the entrance to a huge dark cave. At her side was a monster. It had long, curved horns like a bull and the body of a lion and great gold-red wings. "Oh, grandmother," Kate cried. "It's a wonderful monster." She looked closer. "I can see where you haven't finished it," she said. "Look, there are some stitches missing from its feet." "You have got sharp eyes," laughed her grandmother. Then she grew serious. "I have a very special reason for always leaving a little bit of the figures in my embroideries unfinished, my dear," she said. "And it is a magic reason. You see, if I did finish any of them, they might become more than just embroideries." "You mean they would come to life?" gasped Kate. "Well, they might," said her grandmother. She would say no more, so Kate changed the subject. "What's going on in this space?" she asked her grandmother. "Oh, that's for the prince," said her grandmother, smiling. "Really? Is it going to be the man that I'll marry?" We'll see," murmured her grandmother, but Kate knew that it was. "I can't wait for you to finish it so that I can see him," she said. "Please, may I help you?" "Well, yes, I think you may," said the old lady. So Kate carried on sewing the brightly colored little flowers at the feet of the monster while her grandmother embroidered the prince. They continued to sew together, happy in each other's company. The sun was setting over the silver river when Kate's grandmother decided it was time to stop. She looked down to see how her granddaughter was getting on. To her horror, she saw that Kate was about to sew in the very last stitch on the monster. "No!" she cried. But it was too late. Kate had finished the stitch. There was a great blue flash, and the embroidery was twisted out of their hands. It flew up into the air and it began to spin around in the center of the room. Faster and faster it spun like a whirlwind. Then, gradually, it began to slow down and change shape. Kate clung to her grandmother, hardly daring to look. When she did, when she finally opened her eyes, she gasped. There, in the center of the room, stood the monster from the embroidery. "Who called me?" groaned the monster sadly. Kate found her voice. "I did," she said. "I wish you hadn't," sighed the monster. "Oh dear, I'm sorry," whispered Kate. "Well, please put me back immediately," he begged. "I don't think I can," said Kate. "Why don't you stay here with me? We could have lots of adventures together." "You don't understand," moaned the monster. "I'll die if I can't get back into my embroidery by sunrise." So saying, he leapt through the window and flew away into the dusk. He is a kind of cute monster. "Oh, poor monster," said Kate, and started to cry. There's no time to waste on tears," said her grandmother. "I think we may be able to help him, but we must complete the embroidery as soon as possible. Only then can the monster return." The embroidery was lying on a heap in the middle of the room. Kate picked it up nervously, but nothing happened. There was a space where the monster had been, but otherwise it looked just the same. Kate and her grandmother settled down to complete it. They sewed through the whole night. No one else came to help them, as only they could break the spell. Sometimes Kate thought she could hear the monster sighing outside the window, and that made her sew even faster. At last, the prince was almost complete. Kate's grandmother gave a triumphant cry as she put the last stitch in. This time there was a bright green flash. The embroidery flew out of their hands and started to spin like a whirlwind. In the center, Kate could just make out the shape of a man. It was the prince. Suddenly he was in the room with them. Kate had just time to think how handsome he was when there was a happy roar and the monster flew back into the room. It was almost dawn, and Kate's grandmother looked worried. "We must hurry, my dear," she cried. "There is the background to complete, and we must also bring the princess to life." It was Kate who sewed the final stitch into the princess. There was a dazzling yellow flash, and there was Kate. The two Kates smiled at each other. Then the embroidery princess joined the prince and the monster, anxiously waiting by the great windows. Kate and her grandmother continued to sew. The sky was colored with the first pink rays of the rising sun when her grandmother finished the last flower. This time, there were no bright flashes. Instead, there was the sound of birds singing, and before their eyes, the room changed into the beautiful garden of the embroidery. Bees buzzed through the brilliant red poppies, and glorious butterflies hovered over twinkling streams. "Home, sweet home," cried the monster as he bounded into the dark cave in the center of the flowery garden. The prince and princess waved goodbye as they stepped into the garden after him. The next moment, the sun was streaming in through the great arched windows, and the embroidery picture had gone. "Now you must promise me never to meddle with my magic again, Kate," said her grandmother. "I will sew this picture again when you are a little older. I promise that I'll put the last stitch in your prince, and he'll come back to marry you." And do you know, that's just what happened. And that monster, he remained happily in his embroidered cave forever. And that's it for today. Hope you have a good day. Love you all. Bye.